Every child wants to be understood. Episode 1. Why Children Often Feel Misunderstood by Their Parents. One of the most common but rarely discussed experiences in childhood is the quiet feeling of being misunderstood. Many children grow up surrounded by loving parents, stable homes, and good intentions, yet still carry the subtle belief that the adults closest to them do not truly see what they are feeling. This misunderstanding rarely happens because parents lack love. In most cases, it happens because adults and children experience the world through fundamentally different psychological frameworks. To understand why this gap exists, we must first examine how children interpret emotional experiences and how adults typically respond to them. The difference between behavior and emotional experience. Adults usually evaluate children through observable actions. If a child shouts, refuses to cooperate, withdraws from conversation, or breaks a rule, the behavior becomes the center of attention. From an adult perspective, behavior represents a problem that needs correction. Children, however, experience events internally before expressing anything externally. What adults see as behavior is often the final stage of a much longer emotional process. Consider a simple situation. A child comes home from school unusually quiet. When asked about their day, they respond with short answers and avoid eye contact. Many parents might assume the child is simply tired, moody, or unwilling to talk. Yet, beneath that silence, there may be a completely different reality. Perhaps the child was excluded from a game at recess. Maybe a classmate made a humiliating comment in front of others. Perhaps a teacher corrected them in a way that triggered embarrassment. For adults, these moments may appear minor. For a child whose social identity and emotional resilience are still developing, such experiences can feel disproportionately intense. When parents dismiss or overlook these feelings, not intentionally, but simply because they do not recognize them, the child begins to sense that their internal experience is invisible. Over time, repeated moments like this create the quiet belief that sharing emotions is pointless because no one fully understands them. Children lack the language to explain complex feelings. Another major reason children feel misunderstood is their limited emotional vocabulary. Adults often assume that children can clearly describe what they feel. In reality, emotional awareness develops gradually throughout childhood and adolescence. Young children, in particular, struggle to identify nuanced internal states, such as shame, insecurity, jealousy, or social anxiety. Instead of articulating those feelings directly, children communicate them through indirect signals. A child who feels embarrassed may suddenly become defensive. A child experiencing loneliness may behave aggressively toward siblings. A child dealing with anxiety may refuse to attend school without explaining why. From the outside, these reactions can appear irrational or exaggerated. But the issue is not the absence of emotion. The issue is the absence of language to describe it. When adults respond to these behaviors without investigating the emotional cause, they unintentionally reinforce the misunderstanding. The parent sees stubbornness. The child experiences emotional distress. Both perspectives are real, yet neither side fully understands the other. The adult tendency to prioritize order over understanding. Modern parenting often emphasizes structure, discipline, and productivity. Parents worry about academic performance, social development, and preparing children for future success. Within this framework, maintaining order becomes a priority. When a child disrupts routines or challenges authority, adults feel pressure to restore stability quickly. However, the desire for efficiency can conflict with the slower process of emotional understanding. For example, imagine a child who refuses to complete homework. A parent might interpret this refusal as laziness or lack of responsibility. The immediate response may involve reminders, warnings, or consequences. Yet the child may not be avoiding the task out of indifference. They might be struggling with a concept in class and feeling embarrassed about asking for help.
Each attempt to work on the assignment triggers anxiety about failure. If the parent focuses only on compliance, the underlying insecurity remains unaddressed. The child learns that their difficulty is interpreted as defiance rather than vulnerability. This misinterpretation deepens the sense of being misunderstood. The emotional intensity of childhood. Another crucial factor is the intensity with which children experience emotions. Adults possess years of perspective. They understand that disappointment at school, conflicts with friends, or small setbacks are temporary. Their life experience provides context that reduces emotional impact. Children do not yet have that perspective. Their emotional world operates in a much narrower frame of reference. Because their life experience is limited, each event carries greater weight. A minor social rejection for an adult may represent a brief inconvenience. For a child, it can feel like a fundamental threat to belonging. Similarly, criticism that an adult would interpret as routine feedback may feel like a personal failure to a child still forming their identity. When adults respond with phrases like, "It's not a big deal," they are speaking from the perspective of long-term experience. The child, however, is experiencing the event as significant in the present moment. This difference in emotional scale often produces misunderstanding. The fear of being judged. Children are remarkably sensitive to the emotional reactions of their parents. They quickly learn which emotions are welcomed and which ones create tension. If a child senses that expressing sadness leads to dismissal or that admitting fear triggers criticism, they may begin to hide those feelings. This doesn't mean the emotions disappear. Instead, they become internalized. A child who feels judged may start offering simplified answers when asked about their day. Instead of sharing complex experiences, they learn to say fine or nothing happened. Parents sometimes interpret this silence as normal teenage behavior or lack of communication skills. In reality, it can reflect a learned strategy for avoiding emotional exposure. The child is not refusing to communicate, they are protecting themselves from misunderstanding. Misunderstanding is often unintentional. It is important to emphasize that most parental misunderstandings do not originate from neglect or lack of care. In fact, they often occur in families where parents are deeply invested in their children's well-being. The problem lies in the gap between adult reasoning and childhood emotional development. Adults interpret situations through logic, efficiency, and long-term goals. Children experience the same situations through immediate emotional reactions shaped by developing neurological systems. Without conscious effort to bridge this gap, misunderstandings become inevitable. Recognizing this dynamic is the first step toward improving parent-child relationships. When parents begin to ask not only "what is my child doing," but also "what might my child be feeling," they shift the entire framework of interaction. The focus moves from controlling behavior to understanding experience, the beginning of true connection. Feeling understood is one of the most powerful psychological experiences a child can have. It signals safety, belonging, and emotional acceptance. When parents sense that a child is genuinely trying to understand their perspective, they become more open to communication. Defensiveness decreases, cooperation increases, and emotional trust begins to develop. Understanding does not require agreeing with every reaction or allowing every behavior. Instead, it requires acknowledging that the child's emotional experience is real, even when the behavior needs correction. This distinction is subtle but transformative, because for a child, the difference between discipline and rejection lies in one simple question. Does the adult see only my behavior, or do they also see what I am feeling? When parents learn to recognize both, they create the foundation for a relationship built not on control, but on genuine understanding.